What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Cleveland Pulse YouTube channel. I am your host, Justin Harold, and with me, as always, my co host, Jeff Santa. Today, we are going to talk about the Cleveland Browns roster, depth chart, all that kind of jazz. We haven't really touched on it since the draft, since after the draft, and all that. So, it's been two preseason games. We're at 80 people right now, 80 players on the roster, and we're going to talk about who could make the 53, who could not make the 53, what needs to be added, what needs to be done in order for this team to be ready for week one. But Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I think there's a couple position groups that are consensus that might be overcrowded on one end of the spectrum, and then might be a potential issue on the other end. You have some positional groups that are taken care of for the most part. I think we could all agree on that. Your edge is taken care of on both sides. You would assume, if healthy, our linebackers are pretty solid, and you kind of should have the best cornerback room in the league.
Yeah.
Really should be no debate there. There's some other position groups that are up for grabs, up for discussing. So we're going to get into that.
Yes, yes. So obviously everyone knows about Deshaun Watson being suspended for 11 games. So rocking with Jacoby Brissett for the first 11. And then I don't think we really need to talk about quarterback, but obviously backup as of right now, Joshua Dobbs, who's looked pretty good for the most part. Josh Rosen was brought in to maybe fight for that third string slash backup for Jacoby, but I think that's all taken care of as of right now. So in terms of other positions being kind of a need, Jeff, what are you thinking? What have you been looking at? What have you been seeing through these preseason games and through the camp?
Well, I've been thoroughly pleased with the running backs. Obviously, we know that the three that who were here last year were good. I didn't really know a whole lot about Jerome Ford, as besides the fact that he came out of Cincinnati, and of course he was in the college football playoffs last year. But he has been a pleasant surprise. Obviously, helps he's running behind a offensive line coached by Bill Callahan. We know that that's going to be solid year in and year out for the most part, barring injuries. But yeah, I really have liked the looks of him. I think that you're going to see some movement from that group, whether it's honoring Kareem Hunt's trade request, moving Dearness Johnson, however they feel they could get the job done. I don't see that being a four-man group plus wherever you want to put Demetric Felton to start week one.
Yeah, I feel like Dimitri just needs to be shuffled into the wide receiver room at this point,
Mm-hmm.
considering they're lacking in the department of skill. But yeah, I mean, obviously, any running back that is running behind our offensive line has looked phenomenal, and I think that's helped a lot of potential trade talks. Obviously, you throw Dearness Johnson out there, who didn't get really any love in free agency, but maybe a team that later on in the season before the trade deadline needs a running back will go out and get a Dearness, trade for a Dearness, or if you want to kick it up a notch and really go out and get someone who will help change the landscape of your offense, Kareem Hunt, who is probably going to be a premium at some point, but on that 1 year deal has requested the trade, would be I'd definitely be willing to look to get him or maximizing him in terms of a trade. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And like you said, Jerome Ford, he's looked good, obviously, preseason. But
Sure.
again, it's our offensive line. Really, if you're running behind the four guys of Jedrick Wills, Joel Bitonio, whoever you want to put at center, obviously Nick Harris going down for the season, which is a bummer. But Wyatt Teller is still there. Jack Conklin's still there, which, again, Jack Conklin being able to come back so early from that injury that he got late in the season. And then you still got guys like Chris Hubbard behind him, James Hudson, Michael Dunn, Blake Hance. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
offensive line, we probably got, bar none, a top five offensive line there. So you don't really need to be all that talented. Jeff, moving on to the wide receivers and the tight ends, if you just
Yes.
want to talk about the receiving game in general, not looking too good as of right now. Obviously, we go and we kind of swap out Jarvis Landry for Amari Cooper, but the rest of the receiving group not looking too great outside of David Njoku.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see Njoku and basically him being the full-on starting tight end. I'm sure we'll still see those two tight end packages with Harrison Bryant. That's the Stefanski loves, even though the fans aren't really huge lovers of. But I mean, I'm sure we'll see it because those are pretty much the two go-to guys. Amari being the number one is cool for me because that doesn't mean DPJ has to be the number one. We've seen him in games last year where he had to be the number one receiver. He just can't do it right now. Not saying he won't ever be able to, but he just can't do it right now. And moving forward, you hope that Anthony Schwartz improves every week. And if he doesn't, you hope that Andrew Berry doesn't get into that GM mindset where it's like, I drafted this guy. We're not going to go out and get a veteran, like people that we will talk about here, instead, just to, take his reps. Like, hey, I drafted this guy. We got to play him. We got to play him every week, even if he sucks, can't catch the ball,
Right.
all those things.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good thing though, because he went out and drafted, I think, his replacement already. We're not asking a lot out of Anthony Schwartz because he's the wide receiver 3. Obviously, I think they've already game planned around him with the sweeps and whatnot. But at the end of the day, when it comes to being a wide receiver, I'd be completely fine with Amari Cooper, DPJ, David Bell as your starting 3. So
me too.
And then, like I said, might as well throw Demetric Felton in there because he's done. What was it, Jeff? He gave Baker his first 20+ yard touchdown last season.
He's a guy that you could give the ball to and just hope he goes to work in open space. He's kind of like what you would hope Schwartz would be, where if we run Schwartz out there for a screen, he could, follow some blocks. Yeah, but which we haven't seen yet, but we've seen Felton do it in small quantity last year.
Yeah, and obviously Njoku looking to take on the whole load as the tight end in terms of receiving threats. And then Harrison Bryant, who I've always been a big fan of. I thought he was really good, but you could tell when he fumbled a couple times in the past couple of seasons, it's really dejected him, and he's really seen less production afterwards. But, him being the number 2, I think he could be seeing a huge upside going into this season. So a lot of offensive talk right there. Now we're going to move on to the defense, which, pick your poison in terms of star-studded names, but then also looking at positional value, there's not a lot to be found at D-tackle, and it's still kind of up in the air what's going on with our linebackers. So, Jeff, where do you want to start with this defense? Obviously, you called the cornerback room one of the best.
It should be. It really should be. When healthy, I think you're just extremely deep over there, obviously, with all the names. But it's the defensive line for me, and I've heard this argument. I don't know if you've heard this argument. Not somewhat by design and somewhat not by design. I think our defensive tackles are not great. I've heard an argument where the analytics say that we'd rather have opposing offenses try to run the ball up the middle compared to trying to beat you on the outsides with long pass plays. So you kind of you make sure your edges are good, which they are. Andrew Berry he got good luck with that because obviously he inherited Myles Garrett. He goes out and gets Clowney. Perfect. Your cornerbacks are good, which is mostly through his drafting. Obviously, he inherited Denzel Ward, but he drafted Greg Newsome. You hope Martin Emerson's pretty good, and it seems like he revitalized Greedy Williams' career and even found a player in A.J. Green. Perfect. Your linebackers, that's kind of like the middle position. Like it's definitely not elite, but it's not like terrible. It's not obvious. It's like a middle of the pack. And then your defensive tackles are, like I said, the theory is they're intentionally not great. So teams feel enticed to run the ball, which I think would work. But I think that Andrew Berry's miscalculated what division we play in, considering the weather and considering the running backs in the division. Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, Lamar Jackson is a pseudo running back, and even J.K. Dobbins over there. So it's like, okay, that sounds like a good idea that you want to have them run the ball more than pass. But if they eat you up on the ground game, it's tough to win in the AFC.
Yeah, and it's dejecting to get first downs picked up consistently by running the ball. I mean, as someone who played D tackle, I know that was like the worst if a good run game was getting you going. So, Jeff, we didn't even touch on the safeties. We didn't even touch on John Johnson III, Grant Delpit, Ronnie Harrison, Richard LeCount. Obviously, part of that backfield that we have. And, the one point that you made about the linebackers, they don't have to be particularly great because we might be playing the entire season in a nickel when you have so many great corners like you were mentioning and a good, Grant Delpit coming off of his first healthy season, which I thought he played well. And John Johnson III, I think, coming more into his role. I think he's going to play a lot better than what he ended up playing last year. Again, that's probably going to have to be something that Joe Woods puts him in position to do, which hopefully he will. But yeah, at the end of the day, the defensive line, The only thing that I could say is a possibility that we haven't seen because they don't play it in the they don't play in the preseason is moving Clowney on the inside and maybe moving Winovich, as the other DN and having Miles obviously rush as a DN, and then you only need one good real tackle. So,
Mm-hmm.
but as of right now, your D tackles consist of Jordan Elliott, Tommy Togiai, and a rookie. How do you say his name? Piran Winfrey.
Yeah, Perion
Um,
Winfrey. You're asking a
Piran
lot
Winfrey.
from your rookies and new guys, Winovich, Winfrey. Like, I would agree. If you could move Clowney in and let's just say Alex Wright happens to be a stud,
Yeah,
you could move Clowney in and put Alex Wright next to him, but is that really going to happen? Unlikely.
yeah, and it's always just like you're playing people out of position and trying to play, to a strength that you might not even have. So obviously, you look at the linebackers and you're looking at JOK being your best linebacker. I think that's easily said. And then who knows what's going on, because I've seen a lot of Jacob Phillips talk, but not a lot of Anthony Walker talk.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows what's happening there? I feel like Anthony Walker is just going to be your pseudo starting linebacker just because of his veteran presence and whatnot. And then you have Sione Takitaki, who's probably one of the longest tenured defensive players on this team for what has been, I believe, 5 years. But who knows what's going to happen there? I think that's definitely an area that's been taken advantage of in the past. So who knows? I'm hoping for a linebacker field of JOK and Jacob Phillips at the very least. But who knows? What do you think total though? Do you think this team is going to start off better than what they did last year in terms of defense?
I would hope so, just because they've been together now for a second off season, and that's actually something I was thinking about while you were talking right there, because I can't remember exactly, but I hope they have the green dot figured out, because there was
Mm,
talk last year that Anthony Walker came from the Colts, he was their green dot, and John Johnson III came from the Rams, he was their green dot play caller on defense, and it's like remember one of them would. I don't know if it was Walker or Johnson. When one of them got hurt, and then we knew the other one was the green dot, and I swear our defense played better those games. If it was like a weird coincidence or whatever, but
I
I
thought it
think
was Walker to start,
I
if I
don't know
remember
who it was, but
correctly.
it's like figure it out on defense. We know Joe Woods isn't gonna blitz.
Yeah,
So I'm done complaining every week on this show on YouTube that Joe Woods doesn't blitz, because I guess it's just not analytically NFL sound. You can't. I get it with elite quarterbacks. You can't blitz Mahomes. You can't blitz Brady. You can't blitz Matt Stafford, sure, but it's like you're playing whom week one. Why
yeah,
aren't you sending the house?
yeah.
New offense, he panics under pressure. He's short. You could bat the balls down. Like the first 2 weeks between
Drop
him and
Miles
Joe.
into coverage.
Exactly. And that's why I don't mind JOK, like you said, being our best linebacker, because he's gonna have his hands full week one with CMC coming out of the backfield, both
Yeah.
sides, and what may have it. But first 2 weeks, man, you're playing Baker and Joe Flacco. Like, let's go after somebody. But that's all I'm saying about blitzing for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and you know what we didn't even really get into that was something you and I talked about way back when OTAs first started was the cornerback position and who is starting where. Because I talked about that nickel being what we played the entire season in, because early on in camp it was Denzel Ward
Mm-hmm.
and Greedy Williams being your outside corners
And you didn't
and
like
Greg
that.
News. I don't, because
You'd
I
rather
don't
have
believe.
Greg on the outside.
Yeah, I'd rather have Greg on the outside because I believe long term he's going to be your number two cornerback, which uh, I guess that can be talked about in whatever way you want, because they went out and they got Emerson, who is also an outside corner, and Greedy's
But he's
probably
slow. He's the slow one. Is he like 6'3"? Isn't he like our big corner?
all I know is that the man isn't very good. He's good at like mauling the guys, which obviously
He's
people made a huge.
physical.
Yeah, he's physical, but he's physical against guys, college receivers, and second and third string guys. He is the big guy. He's 6'2". He is kind of like greedy sized. And that's maybe like why they went out and got him, because it reminds him a little bit of Greedy. But I just have a problem with the guy that you drafted in the first round last year, who was a stud. He played
Mm,
very, very well last year on the outside, and kind of taking
I
away
agree.
like the playing time of being that number two cornerback in respects to, Greedy Williams is a good cornerback, but he's on the outs next year. But I guess they're trying to do that thing that you talk about a lot, Jeff, which is maximizing the talent that you have right now. So who knows how that one plays out? I haven't really seen anything talked about that in a long time. But what is your thought with that?
I mean, I agree with you because you're the defensive mind, obviously, from your defensive background, high school football player and easily college football player. But
Oh, I respect that.
Emerson, I feel like is going to be in this weird because like he should be able to guard bigger wide receivers like T Higgins,
Yeah.
like George Pickens, who's like closer to 6'4", I think, if I'm not mistaken. And you know me, I like a challenge, even though it's untraditional, doesn't really happen. But like, can he guard tight ends? Like, it's not going to be great, but like, put him on Mark Andrews. I would love to see the first matchup we have with Baltimore, where he plays and if he plays and what packages he comes in on. But I agree with you. Greg Newsome's footwork, his hips and his body language, his body control is too good to not have him on the outside in the AFC North, in my opinion, because there's a lot of good wide receivers in the AFC North, even if Baltimore is like not the best in the world, but you got pretty deep wide receiving rooms in Cincinnati and in Pittsburgh. So
Yeah. I mean, it's just, to be fair, now that we're talking about Emerson and just the cornerback room in general, I still don't think the dude should be seeing time this year just because I still believe your top three very easily is Denzel, Greedy, and
right,
Greg Newsome.
right.
And obviously, I have a heart on for AJ Green, who I thought played very well
Me too.
last season. And obviously, people remember the Chargers game where, that was his bad game because they called a very awful PI on him.
Correct.
And it led to a touchdown. But, I know people already love Emerson because of what he did in the preseason week one.
And that's good to see, but it's not a surefire guarantee he's going to be, playing.
Right. So it'll be interesting. I do like your comment, though, about him covering tight ends because we've seen it in the past that we've tried to do everything against these star-studded, and it's starting to move towards like, hey, teams really recognize that this having a star-studded tight end really makes the difference. Obviously, Atlanta goes out and gets a Kyle Pitts last year, but you look at the first game last year with Travis Kelce, I believe you watched Denzel Ward kind of get, burned by him a little bit at times, and it's like, all right, if we can't have him guard him, and I think JOK was hurt at the time, we have to see JOK guard these tight ends. And
Joe Woods wasn't even playing JOK week one last year, I think.
Yeah, but wasn't he hurt?
He might have been, but he didn't even really get legitimate. I don't even think he started until
week like 10.
Yeah, actually started, but he's going to start this year. That's what I'm saying though. Like, and this is what I think is kind of interesting too about the AFC North, because Cincinnati's tight end is, I believe, Hayden Hurst, because they lost CJ Uzomah, but it's like Mark Andrews is good. We saw Pat Freiermuth be pretty good as a rookie last year. Like, you have to be able to guard tight ends, especially with the quarterbacks kind of being dump-off machines with either Trubisky or a rookie in Pittsburgh. And then, Lamar Jackson loves Mark Andrews. So you just gotta be able to cover them.
Yeah. All right, Jeff. Well, I think we talked long enough about the depth chart in general, but final topic really quickly here. Who is on the bubble for making the 53-man roster that, we might not have really touched on, or could be like a surprise guy? Because obviously you made the comment about, hey, we've got 5 running backs as it is right now, unless you move Dimitri to wide receiver. Obviously, some of these guys can be protected practice squad guys, but I don't know that you're going to want to do that to talented guys like that. So is there someone offensively, defensively, that you think might not make the cut?
I really just think it's not like we're going to just get rid of them, but like I said, I don't think we're going to have all 5 of those running back, whatever you consider Felton. I think Johnson will get traded or Kareem will get traded. We'll kind of double back on denying his trade request. Probably not going to have all of them. We just don't have use for any of them. I think people are just, jumping the gun. Like I said, Schwartz is making the roster. I get your argument if you think he shouldn't, but it's like, it's only his second year. We used the 3rd round pick on him. Andrew Berry's not going to cut him. And that's another thing. Like Chase Winovich, like, what is he? Is he going to play? Is he going to? I feel like that's an interesting piece because I like the move at the time. I felt like a mutual exchange between him and Mack Wilson, but it's like I just haven't seen enough out of him to be like, oh, he's lighting it up in camp or whatever. He's lighting it up in the preseason. So interesting kind of talking point on maybe his role first, and then if he's actually going to make the roster.
Yeah, it's tough because you look at like a lot of these positions and you're like, all right, well, you need every guy that you can get on the defensive line at this point because your
Right.
two stars are your two stars, and then everyone else is a question mark. Offensively, for me, like you're not cutting Demetric Felton. It doesn't make sense to cut Demetric Felton. You brought Dearness back for a reason. You
Right.
tendered him for a reason. And then wide receiver wise, you're like, there's no one of note that you're going to cut. No one tight end wise of note that you're going to cut. Then you go to the defense and like, yeah, we have a ton of cornerbacks. My biggest fear is that like AJ Green could get cut, but I don't see that happening. You're going to keep 5 cornerbacks, and him and Emerson will be 4 and 5. Safety wise, you're going to keep the 4 that you have there. Javante Moffett, who got brought back, is probably going to get cut, unfortunately. Curtis Weaver is like the only guy I'm looking at this depth chart right now, and I'm like,
Sure.
oh, that was a guy who had huge potential, but is probably not going to make it for whatever reason because you have a rookie behind him or whatever. So I don't think there's going to be any surprise cuts. Special teams wise, nothing really there. So yeah, I don't think there will be a surprise, but I hope that there is a trade between us and someone for one of our running backs, and that's all I can say.
Yep. I think you're 100% spot on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there were. I think maybe last year we had some linebackers between Mac Wilson and Sione, but now I just think the team has kind of found themselves for the most part, and offensively, it's pretty set. Defensively, I
Right.
think there could be maybe some shakeup in the depth chart, but besides that, nothing too crazy. So,
Yep.
Jeff, anything else?
Nope. I'm good.
All right. Well, everyone, like I said in the previous video, we are back. We're going to be coming back with even more stuff throughout the week, going forward into the season, Cavs stuff, all that good stuff. So if you haven't already, please subscribe. Make sure you leave us a comment. Let us know if you think there's going to be anyone that gets cut that's a surprise. Obviously, I wouldn't be surprised to see some Anthony Schwartz haters in the comments. I'm not a Schwartz lover by any means, but I wouldn't be surprised to see some of those people out there. So, with all that being said, we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.